Hey everyone, welcome to your AWS DevOps certification. Now, throughout your learning journey, we'll be introducing you some of the important topics that you need to know from the perspective of AWS DevOps certification examination. Now, do remember, this is a professional level certificate. In order to succeed in this professional level certificate, it's very important that you have as much as hands-on experience as possible because the expectation from a professional level examination, as you know, from the AWS. So first of all, it's not cheap, it's around $200. And along with that, the another thing over here is, so this AWS certification, it expects that you are someone who's already working in this domain so that you can clear, because most of the questions which we have seen and the patterns that we have seen, it's all complete hands-on. Now, in order to help you prepare in this certification preparation journey, we are going to see most of the topics that are relevant for this certification examination in a hands-on manner as we progress in our live sessions. And along with that, at the end of the session, we'll also review the topics and I'll also give you some of the tips so that how you can prepare yourself for your certification learning journey. Because at the end of the day, having this certification as an AWS certified will add weightage to your resume. So with that said, so welcome again, guys. Thank you for joining in. So let's get started in our learning journey. So what do we have as part of our today's agenda is we'll look into the software development lifecycle automation. Now, DevOps is, I can say it's a practice where we want to ensure that we are able to deploy the code as soon as possible. And when we are doing it, we want to reduce the downtime so that the business can work and they always work in the right way. And if something happens, we should be able to revert back those code. So that's what we are looking at when we talk about DevOps. Now, here in this scenario, okay, let me close the other slides. Okay, now here when we talk about DevOps, there are actually two terms will always come into picture. One is continuous integration. Now, in the scenario of this continuous integration, so we'll have a code. So developers, they're going to push the code to a code repository. Sometimes it can be a GitHub, it could be Bitbucket, or it could be the private repositories, just like we have it in AWS Code Commit. So these developers, they push the code to the code repository. Now we'll have a build or a test server. So it is going to check as soon as my code is actually sent. So in order to do that code check, we can have a code build, or we can have a integration tool such as Jenkins, continuous integration, and so on. Now, the result of the build, so the developer is going to get the feedback about the test that it has run, and it also checks and it also gives us the information that whether the test has been succeeded or whether the test has been failed. Now, what is happening in this overall journey? Now, in this overall journey, the developers gets the feedback as soon as possible. So as a result of this, they will be able to find the bugs in an early stage and they can fix the bugs as soon as it is found. Now, this would result in delivering the faster as well as the tested code whenever we are doing the deployment. And since we are testing it before we are deploying it, so since the build cycle is also involved, so we'll be able to deploy in a much more faster way. We can deploy more often, we can increase the frequency, and obviously this would lead to happy customers, happy developers, happy testers. So it would create an ultimate happy scenario because everyone is able to proceed. And most importantly, every code that is being pushed by this developer to the code commit or any other repository, it is being tested. Now, one more concept that you would come across while working with this DevOps is the continuous delivery. Now, continuous delivery is a scenario where we are going to ensure that the software can be released reliably whenever it is required. Now, this continuous delivery, it ensures my deployments have will have the ability to happen often and they are actually quick. So that's what the continuous delivery is. Continuous delivery is all about deployment, overall deployment. So as a result of this, since we are pushing the code and we are building it and we are testing it and we are able to create the deployment, as a result of this, Instead of having one release every 3 months, which we used to have like few years back, instead of that, we can simply say I can do five releases per day. Now, if I'm doing this continuous delivery, it means we'll have the automated deployment. So in order to do this automated deployment, we have various tools. Coming to AWS, we have Code Deploy, we have Jenkins continuous deployment, we have Spinnaker, and so on. So these are some of the automated deployment tools that we have right now. So what it is going to do? So as a developer, I'm going to push the code to the code repository. Once the code is committed to my code repository, I'm going to run the test with the help of my build server. Now, once this test is complete, I'm going to deploy every passing build to my deployment server. So here, everything is automated. Now, previously, there were multiple manual things that we have to do. Now, since we are making use of various services which will help us for CI and CD, so everything will be automated. The developers will be pushing the code, will get the code build and test, and will deploy the code and will deploy to the application server in a more often manner. Now, coming to this overall technology stack in this CI/CD. So this is how the technology stack for CI/CD in AWS would look like. Now, for the code repository, we have a service that's called as AWS Code Commit. So this is a private repository where we can, like it is very similar to what you have experienced in GitHub. So here it is giving you a complete control where you have your own control for AWS Code Commit. So no one like GitHub is actually a public repository, I can say in general sense. So AWS Code Commit is a private repository. Or if you want, you can also host your code in GitHub or any other third-party code repository as well, even if you're using the AWS. So code commit is one available option for us, but there you can also integrate your code from other systems as well. Now, performing the build and test of the application. In order to perform the build and test of my application, we have AWS Code Build. Now, apart from this code build, you can also make use of Jenkins CI or third-party CI servers as well. And for deploying and provisioning, we have the Elastic Beanstalk, which takes care of deployment as well as the provisioning. Or we can make use of Code Deploy to deploy the application, and we can have the user managed EC2 instances, and these user managed EC2 instances that we can ensure that it gets provisioned with the help of CloudFormation. So this is the overall high level diagram would look like. If I'm someone who is interested in performing CI/CD with AWS, so these are the important services which I need to be aware of. And to orchestrate all these things together, to stitch all these things together, we make use of AWS Code Pipeline. Now, if I want to speak a little bit about this AWS Code Pipeline, here in this AWS Code Pipeline, so this is for continuous delivery, and you will be seeing in a hands-on manner as well as what will be the visual workflow. So whatever the steps that we would create, it would appear like a visual workflow for us. It will show where and all it is present. If a step has been failed, it will also give us the information as in which step it has actually failed. Now in this code pipeline, as I mentioned, we can have the source. This source code can be present in my GitHub, or it can be present in code commit, or even it can be present in Amazon S3 bucket as well. Now, in our hands-on session, we are going to place the source code in the Amazon S3 bucket, and here after the source code, we have the build. Now, in order to perform the build, we have the code build and Jenkins and so on. And we can also conduct the load testing using any third-party tools. And coming to the deployment, we have the AWS Code Deploy or Beanstalk or CloudFormation. So this is how the AWS Code Pipeline would look like. Now, this code pipeline will be having a series of stages. In each stage, it is going to say, okay, what will happen? Now, inside this each stage, it can have a sequence of action. So it can have a sequence of action, or it can also have a parallel action. For example, I'll tell you a scenario. If I do a new code commit to my GitHub repository, like I want to run the code build automatically. I want to run the code build automatically. Once it is built, so I want to, let's say, test it. And once I test it, if the test is successful, I want to deploy it. So this overall pipeline, so we call this series of steps which are orchestrated together. We can orchestrate it together with the help of this AWS Code Pipeline. Now, if I do any code change, for example, as a developer, if I commit something to my AWS code commit, then it will automatically trigger the build, and it will automatically perform the test of new code, and it will deploy to my EC2 servers if I'm running on my EC2 servers.